The Atlanta Hawks had an NBA draft and they selected Kingston Flemings at 8 and Zuby Ejiofor at 23. And I'm going to tell you guys why I believe that Kingston Flemings at 8 was absolutely the correct pick for the Atlanta Hawks. And I'm also going to give you my thoughts on the other pick that they made at 23, Zuby Ejiofor. But before I get started on that, I want to tell you guys to hit that subscribe button, like, comment, and share. Tell a friend. Tell a family member, tell anybody to support my channel. The Atlanta Hawks had an NBA draft. They made 2 picks. They took Kingston Flemings at number 8, and they took Zuby Ejiofor at 23. And I'm here to tell you, people, I believe that the Atlanta Hawks got the 8th pick overall pick right with Kingston Flemings. I think that was the correct pick. I think the Hawks made the right call. I think he was absolutely the correct pick at number 8, considering what was available to them. And I like I like it. I like what the Hawks did in the draft for the most part. You know, there's some nitpicks that with the other pick with Zuby Ejiofor that I'll get to later on in this episode. But I want to start with Kingston Flemings. I like the pick with Kingston Flemings. I think it was the correct pick for the Hawks. And on a couple of episodes ago, I did a little bit of a Hawks draft preview. I gave you guys 4 prospects that I thought the Hawks should be looking at pick 8. And the 4 prospects I mentioned was Mikael Brown of Louisville, the point guard. I mentioned Kingston Flemings, the guy that the Hawks ultimately took. I also mentioned Braden Burries from Arizona, the combo guard, and I mentioned Ade Mara, the center from Michigan. And out of those 4 guys, if you ask me who I would have preferred in a vacuum for the Hawks, I actually would have preferred Mikael Brown of Louisville. I know he's had some injury issues, that back that he was dealing with. But I just looked at him on film, and I just think he's the most naturally talented guard, at least out of the 5 through 12. Like, I'm not going to mention AJ DeVance or Darren Peterson or Cam Boozer or Caleb Wilson. But out of the guards in that 5 to 12 range, I thought Mikael Brown was the most naturally talented dude, man. I really liked his pull-up shooting, his off-the-dribble shooting, his ability to get to the basket, finish with craft, his passing, his flair, his explosiveness, his herky-jerky style. Like, I saw a ton of natural talent and ability that he would have been my preferred choice. But look, man, the reality is he was not going to get to number 8. You know, and you likely would have had to trade up to get him. Probably had to trade up to 5 because he wasn't going to go past the Nets at 6. And so it was a long shot of getting Mikael Brown. And if he was not available, I would have taken Kingston Flemings. You know, I just would have. And I think there's a lot to like with Kingston Flemings for the Hawks. And just in general, I think there's just a lot to like about Kingston Flemings in general, man. I think this dude is a really good talent, you know, especially at the guard position. And I think for the Hawks in general, I think the biggest need for this team is they needed an advantage creator. You know, you look at what happened in the playoffs, you look at the second half of the season, the one element that was missing from this team is just somebody who can create advantages. You know, you look at the top guards in this league. You look at Jalen Brunson. You look at Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. You look at Luka Doncic. You know, you look at Cade Cunningham. You know, like Luka Doncic, Cade Cunningham, Jalen Brunson, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. You know, just like what matters in this league, you know, the top guards, they have that ability to create advantages, draw double teams. You know, and then when you draw on double teams, you make the open pass and dudes are open, or you have that ability to make a play. And I think with Kingston Flemings, I think he has that potential to be that. You know, I think there's a lot to like with him. I love his speed. You know, in this league, man, speed kills. You got to have speed. right? You got to have that ability to go coast to coast, and he has that, man. And I think that's what separates him from most of the guards. It's just his speed, his explosiveness, getting to the basket. He's athletic. He can dunk on you. He's capable of it. He's had a couple of nice dunks, and so I like his speed. And you combine his speed with his ability to stop and pop and get to this mid-range shot. It's pretty nice, pretty lethal. Now there are some things he's gonna have to work on and improve. I don't think he's the best finisher. I think his finishing could stand for some improvement. I would like to see him add a floater eventually. I would probably like to see him, get better with his gathers, add more craft, so where he's not just trying to go all the way to the rim all the time, without a plan. I think that's something you want to see him develop, but I think he can develop some of that as he gets more experience in the league, and so, and he's not like he's 6'2.5", 6'3", and so he's not like, he's a little shorter than what I would prefer from a point guard, but he makes his athleticism makes up for some of those size concerns, and so I like him. I like Kingston Flemings, man. I like his speed. And also has to be said, the spacing in Houston wasn't the best. He was playing through two bigs, including Sanak, who got drafted by the Boston Celtics, and so you're playing through two bigs, and the spacing was clogged, and so you had to take a lot of mid-range shots. The lane wasn't open, so you imagine in the league with an emphasis on spacing, it will be somewhat easier for Kingston Flemings to get in the paint more. So that should help him. But still, I would like to see Kingston Flemings become a better finisher. The three-point shooting volume, people have the concerns about that are valid. I'm not as concerned about the three-point shooting. I think he's going to take more threes when he's going to be more emphasized to because Quinn Snyder's going to emphasize shooting more threes. And so I think as a result of that, I do think you're going to see Kingston Flemings shoot more threes. And if you watch him at the combine, I thought his three-point shooting looked good. He shot 19 for 25 from three, at the combine, which is encouraging. So, like I said, man, I think there's a lot to like here with Kingston Flemings. There's some things he has to improve on offense for sure, but man, I think he has enough athletic traits to where you can you're encouraged by what he can bring to the table. And I didn't even mention his defense. His defense was awesome. Like, he was a really good defender, man. I liked his ability to get in passing lanes, get steals, be active, get deflections. His on-ball defense, I think, is, he probably could get a little stronger on that front, but I think he puts in no effort on the defensive end of the court. And I think that stuff matters. You compare him to someone like Trae Young, who, look, I love me some Trae Young. I do, man. But we don't have to lie about it. But Trae Young's defense at times for most of his Hawk tenure was putrid. He wasn't putting in the effort, and the attention to detail, on defense wasn't there with Trae Young for most of the time. That's not going to be an issue with Kingston Flemings. The attention to detail is going to be there with him. There's gonna be times where his size could be a little problematic, depending on who he's guarding. If he's guarding a bigger player, but his effort level is going to be there. His athleticism is going to help compensate for his size issues for a little bit. And so he's a two-way. He has the mindset of being a two-way player when you talk about Kingston Flemings. And what I really like about Kingston Flemings, I just think this dude is just a mature dude, man. I don't know if you guys ever saw the Players Tribune article that Kingston Flemings published on Tuesday. But if I were you guys, I would read the article that Kingston Flemings wrote on the Players Tribune, because it was a beautiful. The topic was to the GMs, and basically he's talking about how when he was younger he got into a car accident. He got hit by a car when he was 4 years old, and his parents were worried that he suffered I think he had they were worried that he suffered like a broken spleen or something. But like basically he survived and he learned from it, and he kind of emphasized that like you can't take life for granted, and that you got to treat everything like it's your last, and you got to put your best foot forward and be a leader and lead and take everything serious, and how everything off the court compared to what I do on the court is like the mindset of a point guard. Like, I think you guys should read the article. Like, read the article. And to me, like, what I got from it is like, this dude just, he cares. He wants to be successful at life, and he wants to be successful at his profession. And I just think his mindset is in the right place. And you listen to his interviews, because I've listened to a good bit of his interviews with Kevin O'Connor, with other basketball draft experts that he's been on. I think he was on a podcast with the No Ceilings crew, and just listening to Kingston Flemings, like, this dude is self-aware of what he wants to get out of playing basketball, what he wants to get out of being in the NBA. And he's self-aware with his weaknesses and what he needs to work on. He's self-aware what he needs. He's got to be better as a finisher. He's got to be better as a three-point shooter. He's got to get stronger. He's got to continue working on his mid-range game. He's got to continue just improving defensively, all of it. Like, he mentioned all of these weaknesses that he's going to have to work on and improve upon. And like, I look at his interviews that I've listened to from Kingston Flemings, and I just come to the conclusion, I just don't think this dude's going to fail in the league, man. Kingston Flemings is going to do whatever it takes to become the best version of himself, whatever that looks like. And I just think if you're the Atlanta Hawks, and I think Ansi Sala and Quinn Snyder are looking at this, and I just to me, I can see why they took Kingston Flemings at number 8. I can understand why they look at him and like, man, we got us one. We got us a killer, because this dude's going to put in work. He's going to be in the gym all day, every year, and he's going to get better. And that's the other thing that Kingston Flemings has mentioned in his interviews on these podcasts that he's been on, is he's talked about he's not going to be the same player that he was as a rookie in year 2, in year 3, in year 4, in year 5. Every year, I'm going to get better as a basketball player. These are the words that Kingston Flemings has said, that he's going to be better and he's going to improve. And you just listen to him and you talk and you see the look on his eyes, and you can just tell that this dude is hungry to win, and he's hungry to get better, and he's hungry to be the best version of himself. And I just think that's the kind of guy you want on your basketball team. And I just think with Kingston Flemings, he's gonna be a guy that's gonna maximize his talent. And I think it's a beautiful thing. I really do. Now, look, does that mean that Kingston Flemings is gonna be like a A+ level superstar? Probably not. I wouldn't bet on it, because reaching that level is hard. So you don't want to put that much pressure on him. But I do believe that with the mindset that he has, that anything's possible. That you can achieve what you want to achieve with this mindset. And when you have the mentality of Kingston Flemings, along with the talent that he already has, with his speed and athleticism and his mid-range shooting and his defensive activity, it's a pretty good combination to have in a prospect. And I think Kingston Flemings has that. And I think what's also, when you look at a basketball fit with him on the Atlanta Hawks, he brings a different dynamic to compare it to anyone else on the team. Like, he has the speed that Kingston Flemings plays with, and the athleticism. No one else on the team can bring what he does. It's kind of different with Nikhil. Nikhil's an outside shooter. CJ McCollum's methodical in his approach. And he's not really an athlete. And you add that in Dyson Daniels, he's kind of more of a utility guard. Like, he can handle the ball, but he's setting screens and he's rolling to the rim. You know what I'm saying? And he's doing the role player things. And so with Kingston Flemings, he brings you a dynamic of speed and explosiveness from the guard position, and just a guy that doesn't need a screen, that can get the ball to the rim and create for others, and at times even finish, and create on his own. And so I like the fit. I think it's a really cool fit. His quick decision making kind of meshes with what Quinn Snyder wants to do. And I think it's going to be an interesting, and I think he's going to make life easier for Jalen Johnson. Jalen Johnson, I think just having a point guard who can distribute and create can take some of the load off him, as a creator. And so I like it, man. I really like it. And the other thing I did not mention with Kingston Flemings is just having a guy like CJ McCollum in the locker room. And it's one of the reasons why I campaigned for the Hawks to keep CJ McCollum and bring him back for at least a year. And he was signed to a 1-year, $21 million extension. And so CJ McCollum's going to be back for a year. And I think one of the reasons why I supported that, along with what he brings on the court, because he's still a good player and he helped the Hawks when he came, but just off the court and as a mentor. I think Kingston Flemings is going to learn from CJ McCollum. CJ McCollum's going to teach him the tricks of the trade, how to get your shot off, how to, I think one of the things I mentioned before is how I think Kingston Flemings needs to develop a floater. CJ McCollum is a guy that's good at making floaters when he's getting to the basket. I think someone like CJ McCollum is going to be able to show Kingston Flemings, the importance of having a floater when you're driving to the basket. Footwork, how to create your own shot, against this certain type of defense. Because CJ McCollum's he's been in the league 13, 14 years. A guy that's a 20-point-a-game scorer. And he's a guy that, if I'm Kingston Flemings, I'm looking at CJ McCollum like, man, I want to be like him. And if not, I want to be a scorer like CJ McCollum. A guy that can give me 20 a game. And I think with Kingston Flemings' ability and talent, he can get there and possibly be better. Because I think Kingston Flemings, he's explosive, he's quick, he has better athleticism than CJ McCollum, and I think he's a better passer than CJ. And so, I really am excited about the partnership of what CJ McCollum is going to bring with Kingston Flemings. I think those two, on and off the court, are going to work really, 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 really well. And so I think that's another element that excites me as a Hawk fan, as far as them drafting Kingston Flemings. As y'all can see, man, I'm really liking this draft pick that the Hawks have with Kingston Flemings. Like, I see the vision. I think he makes sense for how the Hawks want to play basketball. And I think it's just a really good situation for Kingston Flemings to walk into, because he's not going to have the pressure to be the guy early. The Hawks can bring him along slow, and he's going to be in a practice facility, and you can have him, develop in a smaller role early on, and then as he gradually improves, things could get a little easier, and then maybe he can surpass CJ McCollum early on, and then that could be awesome. And so I just think there's a lot to look forward to with Kingston Flemings. I think he's in a really good situation. I think, and all in general, man, for the Atlanta Hawks, I think it's a really good pick. I really do. I think it's a really good pick. I really, really, really believe that. And for the other pick that they made with 23, getting Zuby Ejiofor, I think I said his name right, from St. John's, the 6'7", 245-pound forward. That was an interesting pick. Look, I know everyone wanted a center. I know some people are kind of upset that the Hawks didn't take a Damara. for me personally, I would have, even though I like a Day Murray, even though I mentioned him on the last episode as a guy that the Hawks should be looking at, and I'm sure the Hawks looked at him, but I just think big picture, I probably would have preferred them taking a guard at 8. I think the Hawks had to come out of this draft with a guard. Had to. Because the Hawks needed an advantage, a guy that can develop into an advantage creator. You gotta have that advantage creator. As much as the Hawks could use a Daymara, and I get it. To me, it's easier to find bigs than it is to find an advantage creator. It's just the reality of the situation. The easiest pathway for the Hawks to find an advantage creator is through the draft. And in a draft like this, where there's all these guards, when you talk about, Mikael Brown Jr., Darius Acuff, Keaton Wagler, Kingston Flemings, Braden Burries. You talk about Kristen Anderson. You talk about Bennett Sturts. You talk about Abuka Corey, right? Like, I'm sure I'm missing another guy. I can't remember. But, like, you talk about all these guys. All of these guards were gone before pick 23. Oh, another LeBron Fine. I forgot about him. Like, all of the guards, the top guards, all went 23rd. And so had the Hawks took a Daymara, the guard would not have been there at 23. And so I think the Hawks made the right decision to take a guard at 8. I really do. I think you had to come out of this draft with a guard, whether it was at 8 or 23. And the best pathway for the Hawks to get a guard was at 8. And so I think the Hawks made the right decision to take a guard. And, and kudos to Ansi Salah for making that right decision. And back to Zubi Ekafor. It's interesting because he's 6'7". He's a 6'7" power forward. I don't know if he'll be able to play center, and I know that's something that I think Hawk fans are not too thrilled about. But when I watch him on film, just after watching him after the Hawks took him, the one thing that stood out to me is just how physical he is, how physical he plays, how hard he plays, relentless, tough, physical. He defends, and he has I'll say this. He has a little on-ball ability. He can do some stuff with the ball in his hands. He can pass. He can create his own shot, get in the paint a little bit. I gotta be honest, man. I like him. I kind of like him. Now, from a fit perspective, I don't know how he's gonna fit. Because maybe he can play a little small ball 5. Behind Onyeka Okongwu. But if you're playing him at the 4, the Hawks have a little bit of a logjam at the 4 right now with Jalen Johnson. They drafted Asa Newell. Who knows what's going to happen with Jonathan Kuminga? He might get traded. He might be traded by the time this episode comes out. And so who knows what's going to happen with him? So I don't know how Zubi Ekafor is going to fit on this team. But I think he's talented, man. I think from a talent perspective, he can play. He can play. And so the fit is a little questionable to me. And obviously the Hawks are going to have to figure out their center rotation in the offseason. That's something they're going to have to still figure out, how to add more size, because this team does need more size in the paint. But I like him as a prospect. I think he's a good prospect. I think it's a reasonable pick. I'll just say. Like, I think taking Zubi Ekafor at 23 it's a defensible, reasonable pick. And so I'm not gonna throw a tantrum for the Hawks taking him at 23, even if I would have preferred someone else. And so that's my thoughts on that pick. But look, man, the Hawks did their thing in the draft. They took Kingston Flemings at 8. They took Zubi Ekafor at 23. And all in all, I think the Kingston Flemings pick at 8 was the correct pick for the Atlanta Hawks. I do. I think it was the right pick. That's the guy I would have taken in that situation at number 8. He's the guy that I, kind of had the Hawks on a couple of episodes ago saying that they should target. And the Hawks, to their credit, They targeted him. They targeted Kingston Flemings at 8. And I'm here to tell you people, I think they got it right. The Atlanta Hawks got it right with Kingston Flemings.